Hello? Hello? No, it's been about a month and a half. Uh, let's get into the book. Robot City, Book 2 Suspicion by McQuay. Chapter 1 Paradise. It was sunset in the city of robots, and it was snowing paper. The sun was a yellow one, and the atmosphere, mostly nitrogen-oxygen blue, was flush with the veins of iron oxides that traced through it, making the whole twilight sky glow bright orange like a forest fire. The one who called himself Derek marveled at the sunset from the back of the huge earth mover as it slowly made its way through the city streets. Crowds of robots lining the avenue to watch him and his companions make this tour of the city. The tiny shards of paper floated down from the upper stories of the crystal-like buildings, thrown, for reasons that escaped Derek, by the robots that crowded the windows to watch him. Derek took it all in, sure that it must have significance or the robots wouldn't do it. And that was the one thing he was sure of. For Derek was a person without memory, without notion of who he was. Worse still, he had come to this impossible world, unpopulated by humans, by means that still astounded him, and he had no idea, of where in the universe he was. He was young, the cape of manhood still new on his shoulders, and he only knew that by observing himself in a mirror. Even his name, Derek, wasn't really his. It was a borrowed name, a convenient thing to call himself, because not having a name was not existing, and he desperately wanted to exist, to know who, to know what he was, and why. Beside him sat a young woman called Catherine Burgess, who had said she'd known him, briefly, when he'd had a name, but he wasn't sure of her truth, of her motivations. She had told him his real name was David and that he'd crewed on a settler ship, but neither the name nor the classification seemed to fit as well as the identity he'd already been building for himself, so he continued to call himself by his chosen name, Derek, until he had solid proof of his other existence. Flanked by the humans on either side were two robots of advanced sophistication. Derek knew that, but didn't know how he knew it. One was named Euler, the other Rydberg, and they couldn't, or wouldn't, tell him any more than he already knew. Nothing. The robots wanted information from him, however. They wanted to know why he was a murderer. The first law of robotics made it impossible for robots to harm human beings, so when the only other human inhabitants of Robot City turned up dead, Derek and Catherine were the only suspects. Derek's brief past had not included killing, but convincing Euler and Rydberg of that was not an easy task. They were being held, but treated with respect, innocence, perhaps, until proven guilty. Both robots had shiny silver heads, molded roughly to human equivalent. Both had glowing photocells where eyes would be, but where Euler had a round mesh screen in place of a human mouth, Rydberg had a small loudspeaker mounted atop his dome. "Do you enjoy this, friend Derek?" Euler asked him, indicating the falling paper and the seemingly endless stream of robots that lined the route of their drive. Derek had no idea what he was supposed to enjoy about this demonstration, but he didn't want to offend his hosts, who were being very polite despite their accusations. "It's really very nice," he replied, brushing a piece of paper off his lips. "Nice?" Catherine said from beside him, angry. "Nice?" She ran her fingers through her long black hair. "I'll be a week getting all this skunk out of my hair." "Surely it won't take you that length of time," Rydberg said, the speaker on his head crackling. "Perhaps there's something I don't understand, but it seems from a cursory examination that it shouldn't take you any longer than—" "All right," Catherine said, "all right. 1 or 2 hours. Unless, of course, you're speaking microscopically, in which case—" "Please," she said, "no more. I was mistaken about the time." "Our studies of human culture," Euler told Derek, "indicate that the parade is indigenous to all human civilizations. We very much want to make you feel at home here, our differences notwithstanding." Derek looked out on both sides of the huge open-air V-shaped mover. The robots lining the street stood quite still, their variegated bodies giving no hint of curiosity, though Derek felt it quite possible that he and Catherine were the fiercest humans many of them had ever seen. Knowing nothing, Derek knew nothing of parades, but it seemed to be a friendly enough ritual, except for the paper, and it made him feel good that they should want him to feel at home. "Is it not customary to wave?" Euler asked. "What?" Derek replied. "To wave your arm to the crowd," Euler explained. "Is it not customary?" "Of course," Derek said, and waved on both sides of the machine that clanked steadily down the wide street, the robots returning the gesture of more non-readable silence. "Don't you feel like a proper fool?" Catherine asked, scrunching up her nose at his antics. "They're just trying to be hospitable," Derek replied. "With the trouble we're in here, I don't think it hurts to return a friendly gesture." "Is there some problem, friend Catherine?" Euler asked. "Only with her mouth," Derek replied. Rydberg leaned forward to stare intently at Catherine's face. "Is there something we can do?" "Yeah," the girl answered. "Get me something to eat. I'm starving." Rydberg swiveled his head toward Euler. "Another untruth," he said. "This is very discouraging." "What do you mean?" Derek asked. "Our hypotheses concerning the philosophical nature of humanics," Rydberg said, "must have had their foundation in truth among species." Twice Catherine has said things that aren't true. "I am starving," Catherine complained. And how can any postulate be universally self-evident if the postulars do not adhere to the same truths? Perhaps this is the mark of a murderer. "No, wait a minute," Derek said. "All humans make creative use of language. It's no proof of anything." Rydberg examined Catherine's face closely, then he pressed a pincer to her bare arm, the place turning white for a second before resuming its natural color. "You say you are starving, but your color is good, your pulse rate is strong, and even you have no signs of physical deterioration. I must conclude, reluctantly, that you are not starving." "We are hungry, though," Derek said. "Please take us where we might eat." Catherine fixed him with a sidelong glance. "And do it quickly." "Of course," Euler said. "You will find that we are fully equipped to deal with any human emergency here. This is to be the perfect human world." "But there are no humans here," Derek said. "No." "Are you expecting any?" "We have no expectations." "Oh." Derek directed the spider-like robot guiding the mover, and the machine turned beautifully at the next corner, taking them down a double-width street that was bisected by a large aqueduct, whose waters had turned dark under the ever-deepening twilight. Derek sat back and stole a glance at Catherine, but she was busily pulling bits of paper from her hair and didn't notice him. He had a million questions, but they seemed better left for later. As it was, he had conflicting emotions to analyze and react to within himself. He was a non-person whose life had begun scant weeks before, when he'd awakened without past or memory to find himself in a life support pod, stranded upon an asteroid that was being mined by robots. They had been searching for something he had accidentally stumbled upon, the key to perihelion. At least one of the 7 keys to perihelion. It seemed of incredible import to the robots on the asteroid. Unfortunately, he had no idea of what the keys to perihelion were or what to do with them. After that was the bad time. The asteroid was destroyed by Aranimus, an alien space raider who captured Derek and tortured him for information about the key. Information that Derek could not supply. There he had met Catherine, just before the destruction of Aranimus's vessel and their dubious salvation at the hands of the Spacers' robots. The Spacers also wanted the key, though their means of attaining it seemed slightly more civilized and bureaucratic than Aranimus's. Catherine and Derek were polite prisoners of bureaucracy for a time on Rockcliffe Station, their personalities clashing until they were forced to form an alliance with Fulroth, another alien from Aranimus's ship, to escape their gentle captivity with the key. They found that if they pressed the corners of the silver slab and thought themselves away from the spacer station, they were whisked bodily to a dark grey void that they assumed to be perihelion. Pressing the corners again, another brought them to Robot City, and then their thinking took them no farther, stranding them in a world populated by nothing but robots. And that was it. the sum total of Derek's conscious life. He had reached several conclusions, though, scant as his reserve of information was. First, he had an innate knowledge of robotics and their workings, though he had no idea from where his knowledge emanated. Next, Catherine knew more about him than she was willing to tell. Finally, he couldn't escape the feeling that he was here for a purpose, that this was all some elaborate test designed specifically for him. But why? Why? It was worlds that were being turned here, physical and spatial laws that were being forced upside down. All for him? Nothing made sense. And then there was the key, the object that everyone wanted, the object that was safely hidden by the person who couldn't control it. The robots here didn't know he had it. Were they looking for it too? He'd have to find out. The key seemed to be the one string that held everything else together. Keeping that in mind, he determined to move slowly, to try always to get in more in the way of information than he gave. He had been at a disadvantage for the entire length of his memory. From this point, he wanted to keep the upper hand as far as possible. But there was, of course, the murder. Derek stood on the balcony of the apartment, given to him and Catherine by the robots, looking out over the night city. A stiff, cold wind had come up, the star fields totally obscured by dark, angry clouds that seemed to boil up out of nowhere. Lightning flashed in the distance, electrons seeking partner protons on the star. It was a beautiful sight, and frightening. Derek watched the distant buildings light to near daytime before plunging once more into darkness. There, he said, pointing to a distant tower. It wasn't there a centad ago. Catherine walked up beside him, leaning against the balcony. Where was it? She asked, mocking. It wasn't anywhere, he replied, turning to take her by the shoulders. It didn't exist. It's impossible, she replied, then turned and walked back into the large, airy apartment that sat on top of another tower like the one Derek had said sprung from nowhere. I wish they'd get here with our food. They're probably fixing us something extra special, Derek said, joining her in the living room. And impossible seems to be the way of our lives right now, doesn't it? I'm telling you, Catherine, that along with everything else that doesn't make sense, this city is growing, changing right before our eyes. How can that be? She asked and looked around uneasily. I mean, cities are built, aren't they? They don't just grow. Derek stared at a circle around the room. It was hexagonal, like standing on the inside of crystal, with no visible line of demarcation for the ceilings and the floor. The furniture seemed to flow from the walls, as the table seemed to flow upward from the floor. Light concentrated from the ceiling, and lit the room comfortably, but it seemed the ceiling itself that was alight, with no external apparatus to make it happen. Look around you, Derek said. Everything's connected to everything else, and connected seamlessly, and it all seems to be made from the same material. He walked to a sofa that flowed out of the wall and sat on the cushion that formed its base. Comfortable, he said, but I think it's made from the same material as the harder stuff. Some kind of steel and plastic alloy, just in different measure. Catherine had walked to the table and was staring at it. If you look closely, she said, you can see a pattern to the material. Derek stood and walked up beside her, leaning down on the table to get a close look. The pattern was faint but readable. The table was made up of a collection of trapezoidal shapes, interwoven and repeated over and over. Interesting, Derek said. How so? Is the shape familiar to you? She narrowed her brows in concentration for a moment, then looked at him with wide eyes. The same shape as the key, she said. He nodded. Catherine left him standing there and hurried back out to the balcony. It's almost like the individual pieces stuck together, he called to her. I wonder how they connect. It's gone, she shrieked, and Derek hurried out to the balcony. Your tower from before, it's gone. No, it's not, he said, pointing farther to the east. It's moved? He shook his head. I don't think so. He pointed to the huge, pyramidal shape that dominated the landscape to the west. It was at the top of the place where they were first brought by the key. That's the only building I think doesn't change, and we couldn't see it from the balcony a moment ago. You mean, we've changed? Something like that. She put her hand to her head. Didn't see, feel, It's kind of like watching the clouds, he said. If you stare at them from moment to moment, they seem to be solid and stationary. But once you turn away and then look back, they've changed. It's almost like some sort of evolutionary growth. In a building? If you stay out there much longer, you'll probably get wet, came a voice from behind them. They turned to see Euler's glowing eyes staring at them in the darkness. We've gotten wet before, Catherine returned, looking past Euler to the food being set out at their table. Ah, a last meal for the condemned. The rain here is particularly cool, the robot said, and watched as Catherine shoved past him and ran to the dining area. Perhaps uncomfortably cool for the human body temperature. Thunder rumbled loud in the distance, a brilliant shaft of lightning striking the top of the towering pyramid. Derek turned from the spectacle and moved toward the doorway, Euler stepping aside to let him pass. He walked to the table, sitting across from Catherine, who was already piling food into a large gold bowl into her plate, also gold-colored. The food seemed to be of uniform, paste-like consistency, its color drifting somewhere between blue and gray. Golden cups filled with water sat beside the plates. Are the utensils made of gold? Derek asked, cleaning a spoon melodiously against his plate. Correct, Rydberg said. It's a relatively useless soft metal that is a byproduct of our mining operations. Its one major virtue, besides its use as a conductor, is the fact that it doesn't tarnish, making it ideal for human eating utensils. We made these for David's visit. Derek watched the serving spoon slip from Catherine's grasp to clang loudly against her plate, and for just a second her face turned white. That's what you told me my name was, Derek said, finding the coincidence a little too close for his comfort. She fixed him with unfocused eyes, then shrugged, looking normal again. It's a common enough name on spacer worlds, she said, returning her attention to her plate. She picked up the spoon and went back to the job at hand. Derek looked up at the robots who stood beside the table and the small servo-type I-5 robot waiting patiently near the door for the return of the utensils. Would you care to sit with us while we eat? Derek asked, and felt Catherine kick him under the table. Delighted, Euler said without hesitation, and the two robots sat at table attentively, apparently enjoying, in their way, the human familiarity. Derek took the serving spoon and began filling his own plate. I take it that David was the other human who came here? He asked. That is correct, Rydberg said. Then he came in a ship? Derek pressed. No, he simply walked into the city one day. From where? I don't know. Ah! Catherine yelled, spitting out food and grabbing for the glass of water, drinking furiously. The robots swirled their heads to watch, then exchanged glances. Are you trying to feed us or kill us? She demanded. Our programming would never allow us to kill you, Rydberg said. That would be quite impossible. David tentatively dipped his spoon into the poured-like mixture, taking a small bite. Not sour, not sweet. It simply had a strange, alien taste, accompanied by a slight, noxious odor, one that he was also uncomfortable with. The stuff stinks, Catherine said loudly, the robots looking at her, then turning expectantly toward Derek. She's right, Derek replied. What is this? A perfect non-toxic mixture of local plant matter, high in protein and balanced for carbohydrates, Rydberg said. It's good for you. The other human ate this? Derek asked. Quite enthusiastically, Euler said. No wonder he's dead, Catherine muttered. This is simply unacceptable. We're going to have to find us something else, something that tastes good. Derek took another bite, this time holding his nose. Disassociating the smell from the food helped some, but not too much. The gruel left an unpleasant aftertaste. How could the other man have eaten it and not complained? Less made sense all the time. How long before you can get us something else? Derek asked. Tomorrow? Rydberg suggested. Although they were proud of this in food services, finding something of equal nutritional value will be difficult. Forget nutritional value to a degree, Derek said. Study other human foods and see how well those can be duplicated exactly with the know-how you have here. He looked at Catherine. We should probably try to choke some of this down to keep our strength. She nodded grimly. I already figured that, she said, and looked at Rydberg. Bring me lots of water. The robot hurried to comply, fetching a golden pitcher from the servo cart and refilling her cup. When did he die, this David? Derek asked, holding his nose and taking another bite. 7 days ago, Rydberg said, sitting again and carefully positioning the pitcher within everyone's easy reach on the table. Well, that rules us out as suspects, then, Derek said happily. We didn't arrive here until last night. You'll have to excuse me, Rydberg said politely, but Catherine has already exhibited a penchant for speaking less than honestly. What's that supposed to mean? Catherine said angrily. No disrespect intended, Rydberg said. It is simply the case that your veracity must be in question in light of our conversations this afternoon. At this point, we don't know if we can trust anything either of you says. We don't even know where this place is, Derek said. Then how did you get here? Wheeler asked, swiveling his head to stare directly at Derek. Derek began and slapped himself. He wasn't ready to admit any knowledge of the key. It was their only weapon, their only potential salvation. He couldn't give it over so early in the game. I don't know. Derek stared for several seconds before saying, To believe you means that you either materialized out of the ether, or were somehow brought here totally without your knowledge or consent. Derek responded by taking the conversation away from the robot's control. You see, this David also seemed to appear out of nowhere. Did you ever question him about his origins? Yes, Euler said simply. And you know nothing of his background. Derek said, trying to keep his mind off the food by concentrating on the investigation. Across from him, Catherine was swallowing her food whole and washing it down with large gulps of water. How was he dressed? He was naked, Euler said, and he stayed naked. The two humans shared a look. Nudity was common and casual in many spaciouser worlds, but the climate here would hardly recommend it. When can we see the body? Derek asked. That's not possible, Euler told her. Why? I cannot tell you why. Cannot or will not? Derek asked, exasperated. Cannot and will not, Euler replied. Then how do you expect us to investigate the cause of death? If either or both of you are the murderers, Euler said, you already know the cause of death. You've already decided our guilt, Derek said, pointing. That's not fair or just. There are no other possibilities, Rydberg said. When the possible has been exhausted, Derek replied, it is time to examine the impossible. We are innocent, and you can't prove that we aren't. It only follows that death was caused by something else. Humans can murder, Euler said as thunder crashed loudly outside. Humans can lie. You are the only humans here, and murder has been done. We came out of nowhere, Derek returned. So did David. Others also could have come out of nowhere, others you haven't discovered yet. Why, had we committed a murder, would we stay around for you to catch? The robots looked at one another again. You raise lots of questions that must be answered, Euler said. We certainly sanction your investigation. How can we investigate without full access? With all the other resources at your command, Rydberg said, then stood. Are you finished eating? For now, Derek said. We'll want real food tomorrow, though. We will do our best, Euler said, and he, also, stood. Until then, you will stay here. I thought I might go out, Derek said. The rains will come. It's too dangerous. For your own safety, you will stay here tonight. We have found that we cannot be certain if what you tell us is correct, so we are leaving a robot at the door to make sure you stay in. You don't know that we've done anything wrong. You can't treat us like prisoners, Catherine said. And we shall not, Rydberg said, moving toward the door. The servo whirred up to the plate, its metal talons pulling the bowls and plates into its innards. There are many things we need to talk with you about, Derek said. Tomorrow will be the time, Euler said. We will have a long interview at a prescribed time where many issues will be discussed. Until then, we cannot fit it into our schedule. We are currently quite busy. The robots turned to go. A couple of questions first, Derek said, hurrying to put himself between the door and the robots. You said we aren't prisoners, that you have to lock us up. How long do we have to stay in this place? Until it is safe, Rydberg said. Then if you do let us out, Derek persisted, how can you be sure that we won't try to escape? We will have to keep a very close watch on you, Hila replied. With that, the robot firmly, but gently, pushed Derek aside and moved out the door, the servo following quickly behind. Derek tried to follow them out, but a squared-off utility robot blocked his path, its body streaked with random bands of different colored paints, like the colors on an artist's palette. Stand aside, Derek told the machine. It is dangerous for you outside. I am here to keep you inside where it is safe, and have no more conversation with you, lest you try and deceive me. Me? Derek said. Deceive? The robot pushed the door stud and the unit slid closed. Derek turned to Catherine. What do you make of it? She moved to sit on the sofa, then stretched out, looking tired. We're being held prisoner by a bunch of robots with no one in charge, she said, sighing deeply. The dead man was an exhibitionist who, apparently, ate anything. They want us to prove our innocence, but refuse to let us see the body or investigate. She said abruptly, eyes narrowing. Derek, we've got to get out of here. They won't do anything to us without proof of our guilt, Derek replied. It's not in their nature. We'll stay around and get this straightened out, and then they'll be happy to send us on our way. Besides, this place has got me really curious. How does it work? Why does it work? She lay down again, staring at the ceiling. I'm not so sure they'd really let us leave, she said, voice distant. I think we've stumbled onto something completely crazy. A robot world without humans could take any sort of bizarre turn. But not a, what did you say, completely crazy turn, he replied. They can't be crazy. There's no logic to crazy. Besides, what makes you think we've stumbled into anything? We were brought here, plain and simple, for a reason that hasn't been made clear yet. Maybe a little time here will help us ferret it out. You ferret it out, she said. I'm tired. Well, I'm not. He moved to the balcony, feeling stiff wind on his face, as the light show continued to rage outside. I'm going to go out tonight and do a little poking around. She was up from the couch and moving toward him. They said it was dangerous, she said quietly, a hand going to his forearm. Go out tomorrow. Under their watchful eye, he said, then shook his hand. We need to get around on our own, and this is the time. Besides, a little rain can't hurt me. Stay, she said. I'm afraid. You? He laughed. Afraid? She pulled her hand away. All right, she said. Go out and get yourself killed. I'm tired of looking after you anyway. You're angry. And you're an idiot. She turned from him and stared out across the magnificent city, realizing that its beauty was for them alone to appreciate. There's something utterly sad about that. How will he get past the door guard? We'll take his advice and deceive him, Derek said. We? Will you help me? She turned and walked back into the apartment. Anything to get you out of my hair, she said over her shoulder. Derek's plan was simple enough, but it was one he could only use once. The robots learned quickly enough of human duplicity, arming themselves with the knowledge as a precaution. But just this once, it might work. He crouched beside the sofa, knotting into a tight ball. Just as soon as he was well out of sight of the door, Kate took a deep breath and tried to open it. Locked. She shrugged once in Derek's direction, then began screaming in terror. A second later, the door slid open and the utility robot blocked the entry. What's wrong? It's Derek, she cried, pointing. He fell from the balcony. Without hesitation, the robot rolled into the room, ready to check her story for lies and deceit. He quickly moved toward the balcony, leaning way over the edge to get a look into the night. Derek jumped up from behind the couch and hurried quietly out the door and into the elevator that took him all the way to the ground, and his first positive step in uncovering the mystery of Robot City. He was free, but what that meant here, he could only guess. Okay, so this is going to be where I'm going to end for the day. Thank you for listening, enjoying, and so on and so forth. Good lord. Chapters in this are fairly long. Anyway, yeah. Thank you for enjoying. Bye.